Hey everyone, I'm Mary Mancusi, the author of Scorched, amongst other books. And I understand that it's National Read Aloud Day. So I wanted to read to you guys a little bit from Scorched just to help celebrate the day. So this is chapter 12. This is after Trinity meets Connor, and he tells her he's from the future and he's trying to stop the dragon apocalypse. And she isn't sure if she should believe him or not. And so he sends her into a memory of the apocalypse so she can kind of relive it herself. Okay, so she's a little freaked out in this part. All right, I'm going to start reading. The world was on fire. At least that was Trinity's first thought as she opened her eyes. No longer safe and sound in her mother's old house, she found herself standing in the center of old Oak Grove's town square, an inferno raging all around her as far as her eyes could see. White hot flames licked at shops and restaurants, while bright orange fire devoured the trees. Smoke, thick as pea soup, flooded the streets as desperate, human-shaped shadows flew past her, stumbling in a frantic attempt to reach safe ground. Sobs echoed through the air, competing with children's screams, and the marble fountain in the center of the square violently boiled over. "Connor," she cried, trying to peer through the smoke, "are you there?" Her voice was raw and hoarse, and her lungs burned in protest as she waited for his reply. But there was no reply, no answer to her calls, no sign of the time traveler who'd sent her to this hell on earth. She was alone. How could he do this to her, just dump her there at the end of the world with no explanation as to what she was supposed to do, where she was supposed to go? Was this simply a vision of an event that had already taken place, or had he actually sent her forward in time? Was she safe and sound in her former home, still gripping Connor's hand? Or was she really here, her life in danger? An inhuman screech ripped through the air, shattering her questions and rendering her immobile. At the same moment, the smoke seemed to sweep away in a sudden gust of wind. Gathering all her courage, she dared to look up just in time to see a shadow of a giant serpent swimming through the sky, its wingspan so vast that for a moment it blotted out the sun. A dragon, a giant dragon, whirling above her, beating the skies with its leathery wings, its tail snapping back and forth behind it. From where she stood, she could just make out the thick red scales, the long claws, the razor-sharp teeth, the black, vacant eyes. It was both impossibly beautiful and exquisitely terrifying, and Trinity found she couldn't look away. The beast turned on a dime, shockingly graceful for its gigantean size, and landed on a nearby church steeple. As Trin watched, breath in her throat, it slowly pulled back its massive head, opening its mouth with a long, loud hiss. A blast of fire shot out, and she leapt back just in time as it rained down on the town square only inches from where she'd stood. Heat slashed at her skin, drenching her in sweat. "Get out of there, Trinity, now!" She started to run down the street, through the alley, over the bridge. Screams assaulted her ears as she leapt over charred lumps she didn't want to identify as human, and her nose was assaulted by the smell of burnt flesh. It was all she could do not to stop and puke her guts out, but to stop was to die, and so she kept moving. Bursting into a vacant lot, she heard a cracking sound above. She looked up, her eyes locking on a burning roof, reaching the point of collapse. She leapt back, but found she couldn't dodge the fiery chunk of wood flying at her face. Instinctively, she put up her arm as a shield. As the wood hit her hand, she shrieked as the flames seared her skin. Cradling her burnt hand, she bit back the pain, reassessing her surroundings. The collapsed roof prevented her from going any further forward, and the way she came was no longer an option. As she desperately tried a few doors, all of them locked, her eyes fell upon a small hole, a drainage ditch large enough to crawl into. It looked dark and dank, the kind of place filled with rats and snakes, but she dove in anyway, splashing through the murky water, ignoring the putrid smell, thankful to be out of the fire's path. As she pushed on, literally seeking the light at the end of the tunnel, the space tightened, stealing her breath. Sweat dripped down her neck, and her legs cramped as panic rose inside of her. What if she got stuck in here? She paused, willing her pulse to steady as she watched. Let me start that again. She paused, willing her pulse to steady as she watched the frantic feet of those still running for their lives outside. She didn't know what was worse, hearing the screams of terror or hearing those screams fall silent. When this was over, there would be nothing left. No one left. A thundering outside the tunnel made her draw in breath. A moment later, the circle of light eclipsed, and she found herself engulfed in darkness. It wasn't until her eyes adjusted that she caught movement in the blackness. A single eye, peering back at her, large, blue, with a gold crescent pupil. A dragon's eye. She squeezed her own eyes shut, trying to prevent her body from shaking with terror and giving her position away. The dragon was too large to enter the tunnel and eat her raw, but it could always choose to serve her up as flambe. Neither scenario sounded like a good way to go. "Open your eyes, Trinity," She startled. That voice again, from back at the museum and at her grandfather's house. Could it be? Can you hear me, Trinity? Open your eyes. She found herself obeying, reluctantly opening one eye, then another. A sudden bright light forced her to squint, and she realized the dragon had stepped away from the entrance and was now standing a few feet away, calm, fireless, observing her with a curious expression on its face. Come on out. I won't let them hurt you. What else could she do? With effort, she began to crawl in again, squeezing her way through the tunnel until she was able to emerge on the other side. Relief flooded her as she scrambled to her feet, stretching her cramped muscles. For a moment, she was so happy to be free of the cramped space. She forgot she was still face to face with a dragon, a talking dragon nonetheless. Who are you, and how do you know my name? She found herself blurting out. Probably the most ridiculous, insignificant questions possible at a time like this. But what else did someone say to a dragon? Eat any good people lately? The dragon seemed to chuckle as if she could hear Trinity's thoughts. Maybe she could. My name is Amberlyn, the voice in her head informed her. Trinity's heart stuttered. That's my mother's name, she rasped. The dragon nodded her massive head, not looking surprised. You named me after her, she explained, to honor your mother's memory. But you usually call me Emmy. But that doesn't make any sense. Why would she name a world-destroying monster after her mother? Why would she name a world-destroying monster at all? Because you're the fire-kissed, Emmy replied, once again reading her mind, and we are destined.